Maroon article is that in sort of a fairly egregious case of journalistic malpractice, they put that article out saying that they'd reached out to me for comment and then I hadn't commented and they hadn't reached out to me at all. I had edited the bylaws such that I had basically just accreted a bunch of power directly into myself because I held all these roles. So I could just give powers to different roles, and it would look like it was all dispersed, but in reality it was all going to the exact same person. Because people kept appointing me to things because they wanted the job done right. And they wanted the job done by someone who knew how it worked. And they kept appointing me to new things over increasing calls to basically go, why does this guy have so many chairmanships? And the answer, if you look at the minutes, is no one else is doing it.
Hello everyone, welcome back. So today we have here Nevin Hall. Nevin Hall has been a particularly famous figure in UChicago for the last few months, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to bring him to the Thinker and kind of hear his thoughts on, what's going on and why he became popular in the first place. Really hear from him his own perspective. So first of all, Nevin, thank you very much for being here. And first off, let's step back a little bit, and before we dive into what happened and before we dive into you, just really explain, a lot of people aren't familiar with USG, right? What is USG? What does it do? What does it do? Just
sure. Yeah.
Overview.
Well,
yeah.
First, of course, thank you for having me.
Of course.
USG is the kind of commonplace acronym for undergraduate student government, and USG has, you can sort of neatly divide it into two parts, right? USG has three parts. USG has responsibility in terms of advocacy. So they are, a group of elected representatives who advocate on behalf of the student body, what they think that students need, sort of talking to administration, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. The second part is largely finance. Most people don't know that student government spends, a decent amount over $2 million a year. So it's a 7-figure budget to fund
RSOs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to fund RSOs. And then the third part is kind of kept very quiet. It's the Student Advocate's Office, which kind of helps navigate conduct issues, housing issues, that sort of thing. And so they kind of help you navigate the administrative tribunals that this university runs, because the university ombudsperson is, that's not their role. And so the SAO is sort of a thing that was copied from University of California, Berkeley, as sort of like a neat institution that worked well over there. And so that's also hived within student government, though very independent from the rest of student government. So those are the rough 3 parts, done at light speed.
And what was your role? A better phrase it. What were your roles?
Yeah.
In USG more recently, and how did you get? What were your responsibilities in there?
Sure. So I held, at the time I was impeached, I was the chair of the Program Coordinating Council, which spent several $100,000 to fund things like the Major Activities Board, the Council on University Programming, stuff like Summer Breeze. I was the chair of the coalition of academic teams that funded things like Model UN and Moot Court and that sort of thing. I sat as an appointed member of the Sports Club Finance Committee, which spends, at the time it was roughly $150,000 to fund sports clubs, things like rugby or crew, for all club teams, not varsity sports. I was vice president of student organizations, which meant that of the 7 finance committees that sort of do preliminary allocations for the 7-figure budget that we're talking about, I sort of oversaw their operation, just kind of tried to make sure that everything worked, and then kind of came up with the sort of annual allocations, sort of the annual budgeting for those committees, and tried to come up with some kind of schedule to keep everything running on time. And then last but certainly not least, this was actually my favorite one and kind of my baby, was I was chair of the Elections and Rules Committee, which ran student government, which still kind of runs student government elections. And so that's
so how many roles is that at the same time?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you count, because VPSO is also simultaneously members of these finance committees. In some of these committees they have a vote, and others they don't. I mean, it depends on how you count. It's at least 4. Yeah, it's at least 4. Three direct chairmanships and a vice presidency. So at least 4. And
it's not normal for someone to have these many roles at the same time.
I mean, there were a lot of questions basically about this guy's got a lot of roles. Can he do it? And obviously the answer, yes, I can in fact fulfill all of those roles at the same time. And there were questions about whether someone should combine all those roles at the same time, and that was sort of an open question.
Yeah. So you were impeached from your role late last year, right? It was, I think it was the most amount of people that went into the Cobb at night at the same, at any point in time.
It's the most well attended college council meeting.
I wouldn't doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those unfamiliar with it, What were the accusations, and how did they come into play, given the roles that you had there?
Sure. So I mean, by far the biggest one was that I had edited the bylaws such that I had basically just accreted a bunch of power directly into myself because I held all these roles. So I could just give powers to different roles, and it would look like it was all dispersed, but in reality, it was all going to the exact same person because I held all of them simultaneously. The others related to, like, there were accusations of personal favoritism for RSO funding. So that
So what does that mean?
like that I had a personal connection to certain RSOs, and that meant that I would give them more money.
Okay.
There were accusations about, like, committee conduct. So basically, that I was dictatorial in committee, and that I hadn't educated myself properly on RSO functions. Trying to, yeah, that pretty much sums it all up. I wrote an op-ed in the Maroon about it that goes into sort of more detail. But that's the rough general overview. It's basically bylaw issues, committee issues.
And so basically, they were saying you monopolized the way USG worked, and you were favoring yourself by being in all these committees. Obviously, the Maroon article came out a few months ago, explaining the situation. And what was your view on it? Do you think how deep do you think these allegations go into proof?
So, I mean, first, what I will say about the Maroon article is that in sort of a fairly egregious case of journalistic malpractice, they put that article out saying that they'd reached out to me for comment and that I hadn't commented, and they hadn't reached out to me at all.
Really?
Yes, which they've buried at the end of the article in sort of an editor's note. So that's kind of journalism 101. You don't really violate that. So I think it's first sort of to point that out. When it comes to whether or not these allegations are true, I would say that, I mean, they are not, as a rough general rule. So when it comes, like, the committee conduct stuff is so blatantly, egregiously false.
You mean the bylaw situation?
So the bylaw situation is a little bit more complicated, largely because, I think it's important to sort of do a kind of a timeline of what we're talking about here.
Please, yeah.
So I was appointed. Should be noted at all these points, I never elected myself to any of this. I just kept being appointed by other people, the same people who impeached me, which is kind of ironic.
Interesting.
And by unanimous votes as well, largely. I was appointed to the Elections and Rules Committee, and by the end of my first year, I was its chair because the chair is elected, and the two other members had either graduated or left. As a part of that, a new president had just come in, a guy named Jefferson Lind, and this is kind of important. He's from Austin, Texas, and I also am from Austin, Texas. So we met up the summer before my second year, to talk about the bylaws, largely because there was a lot of confusion about, like, how elections were supposed to work. And this had become kind of a real issue because traditionally elections and rules had come into chair meetings to break vote ties. But this had never been written down, so there were problems with this, and then the bylaws themselves hadn't been modernized in a while. And so I sort of bring this to Jefferson. I'm like, okay, Jefferson, you're USG president, like, fix it. And we'd corresponded about the bylaws in the past, and he basically went, hey, listen, you have more procedural expertise than I do in this. Could you draft these sort of changes? And we came to sort of an agreement.
Draft the changes to the bylaws.
Yes, to sort of fix these problems. And then it also came in the course of other discussions, right? At the time, the major concern was that a long-running traditional sort of opposition ticket was run by formerly Delta Upsilon, the fraternity, which then became the Iron Key Society. There were worries that they might actually win at some point. And Maine USG viewed this as kind of a big problem for a variety of reasons, but the sort of main issue was that if they did that, then they could appoint members to the elections board, which might be a long-term problem.
What is the elections board?
Elections and Rules, which was the committee that I then chaired and you sat on for years. And so they were worried about this. There were all sorts of other concerns, among them being one of the ambiguities was that there was this judicial council that's mentioned in the Constitution that's not actually implemented, which Jefferson kind of hoped to bury and forget about. And I'm like, okay, Jefferson, you have to tell me how to deal with this because I can't interpret these on my own, right? So like you need to figure out what the problem is. You need to figure out how you want to solve it, and then we do this. And in essence, what we came to at the time was a deal that I then drafted, which was I would be largely unimpeachable. Members of elections rules would be largely unimpeachable. I would get a 2-year term extension, basically to protect at least me from any frat ticket winning. and the Judicial Council would be hived under elections and rules. It would be just sort of buried deep in a bylaw change, and then I would just never use it. And this is important because the Judicial Council could remove members unilaterally from USG even if they were elected, which is kind of like a big deal. And so this is why it's important that it's never used, right? And so when it comes to bylaws changes, that's the sort of first big tranche, and there are a good number that come after that, basically where people go, we don't understand how this works, or we don't know why this exists, or all sorts of other things that need to be updated. And it's like parliamentary procedure changes, finance changes, all this other stuff. And what kept happening is people kept coming to me and going, you're the only guy who's actually redrafted these in living memory.
That's right.
You're the only one who knows how they work. Can you redraft this?
So you had more expertise in the bylaws than basically anyone else in USG. You redrafted many of the changes, and those changes were approved by the people.
Well, so they were given in full to College Council. Sometimes they edited them rightly, and then they were approved. Typically, I don't remember the exact vote counts for all of them, but normally unanimously.
Yeah, but what it seems to me in some forms that you made a bunch of the changes and they just didn't seem to know better and they approved of it. Is that
So,
somewhat fair?
Well, so they always got a summary of the changes.
Okay.
They were always given the full text. It doesn't appear that they ever read them. The other thing is that this is another element. I can't vote in College Council, and as a part of my position in elections and rules, I don't have a view on what the bylaws are. I can't draft them, I can't propose them, I can't do anything. Yeah. All I can do is if you ask me to help you draft, I can give you a draft, and then you can put it up in your name, which is what happened every time. Yeah. So there was never a bylaws resolution that I sponsored because I couldn't.
Yeah. So the allegations that you were changing the things for yourself, for your own benefit, could easily be stopped.
Yeah, had anyone read them and taken issue with the way that things were being implemented, or had gotten any kind of expertise with how the bylaws functioned, this could have, and frankly, I tried to prompt more debate and discussion about these things.
Yeah.
But normally they just kind of went through on the nod. And if you look at the minutes for all these meetings, it's like a maximum 5-minute discussion. No one ever has any questions. No one, I give a summary, no questions, typically no edits, no kind of engagement whatsoever. And if you go to a College Council meeting, this makes sense because they're normally just sort of staring at their computer screen doing homework through most of the meeting, of course they're not going to know, right? They haven't read them in advance.
Yeah. So how much of a responsibility, from what has been said around, it seems like the image is that you changed it all by yourself and you wanted to do things by yourself because you're a Churchill-loving dictator.
Yeah.
How much responsibility do you think the people in the council had for not stopping you or for not seeing that before?
So yeah, I think there's an important terminological distinction here. I can't do anything. Yeah. I was never in a position to do anything. Like the only place where my vote had any kind of say that couldn't be overridden by College Council was in elections and rules. And even then I didn't have a vote because I was the chairman. So I only voted in case of a tie. So the question is not, could they stop me? It's at any point, had they read this and gone, hey, could we implement this thing this way? Or hey, why did you choose to do this thing this way? Had they asked a question at any point in time, I would have been more than happy to explain why these things were happening this way and come up with a different mechanism. Because then the other concomitant element is bylaws tend to just grow in length and grow in complexity and grow in tasks. And the other issue is you have to make, if you're going to implement a task, you have to make sure it's done. And the places where I knew stuff was getting done were the places that I was. So I knew elections and rules would do something because I was there and could make it and could just make it happen, right? And delegate internally that committee. Or same with CAT, the Coalition of Academic Teams, PCC, like all of this stuff I knew could make happen because I could just ride people to make sure they happen.
And, in this topic of allegations, do you have any extra allegations that you would like to confront face on? Anything else that has been said, do you think it's important to be addressed?
Not in particular. A lot.
So you think the narrative that's been put out is accurate?
No, the narrative itself is false. I guess to sort of counter all of them at once, I would say this. People kept appointing me to things because they wanted the job done right. And they wanted the job done by someone who knew how it worked. And they kept appointing me to new things over increasing calls to basically go, why does this guy have so many chairmanships? And the answer, if you look at the minutes, is no one else is doing anything. So people wanted it done. So there's that. So how did I get all these roles? I didn't appoint myself or write them into existence, right? USG kept appointing me to things. And then the other element is people have to remember that I didn't have a vote and was required to be neutral for all these things. And if you look at
because
the minutes,
you were the chairman.
Yes. And was punctiliously so. So the underlying argument that I could do anything or rig a committee is just blatantly impossible. It's false. And it's impossible. Structurally impossible for me to have done that.
So what do you think it was that broke the camel's back and made these people want to impeach you then?
Well, so there's one member of college council who's hated me for a while, Kevin Guo, because of what he views as my basically blocking in a different implementation of the judicial council that he wanted. Obviously, I can't block anything. I am not in a position to be able to block anything. So obviously he, continued to dislike me, and then, why college council voted the way it did was obviously, I think, a lot of public pressure, because people were there and they'd announced that impeachment was happening, and so they felt kind of compelled to do it.
Just to clarify something, you weren't at the hearing, were you?
No, so they reached out to me to try to schedule the hearing, and I go, hey, the time you've picked, for personal reasons, I'm just not available. Could we have a different time? And they're like, no. So I didn't have a chance to make any kind of public statement at that hearing.
So did you have someone vouching for you or your defense? Because you weren't there?
I had no defense at all.
Okay. So did they hear your side of the story before they voted to impeach you? What was the timeline between?
So I was asked to resign from elections and rules the Monday before, a couple of days before, because I had just been reelected unanimously to vice president of student organizations for the next year. And they were like, hey, this is totally reasonable. Hey, interim running both elections and finance at the same time is okay. Doing it for an entire calendar year is a little bit more suspicious. And I was like, that's totally reasonable. Yeah. And so we kind of talked about, similar allegations were made on Monday. And we talked about them, but it wasn't so much of a defense as just more of a talk. And then on Wednesday, I had no defense whatsoever. No one was there for me. I couldn't speak for me. There was no articulation of a defense from me at all.
And
it should. I'll append.
Yeah.
The impeachment allegations themselves are like 111 pages. Like the length of the document itself is sort of absurd. And if you look at college council meetings from like the next college council meeting immediately after the impeachment, several members go, "Hey, we didn't really have time to read all of it." So
you're saying that not only you didn't have a defense, but they also didn't fully understood what was going on.
No, and their minutes reflect this, right? Right? They go, hold on a second. We basically crucified this guy by making this a spectacle and posting it on Instagram that an impeachment is happening. People were apparently like drinking Red Bull and eating ice cream at this thing, and it's like, okay, well, so it
became a show.
Obviously a serious judicial proceeding, and people said that they hadn't had time to actually read the document. And one member who, I think this, speaks to his integrity, basically goes, if we're accusing Nevin of basically putting through a bunch of stuff and we didn't read it and basically just sort of sliding stuff under our noses, which I again say is false. This is exactly what just happened with this impeachment resolution. We didn't have time to read it, and it just went through like we didn't read it conscientiously.
So it's basically proving exactly what they were arguing against, basically.
Yeah.
Interesting. One of the quotes that I got from the impeachment file, which seemed to alarm a few people, was, "I enjoy being an USG bureaucrat because I can do what I want without getting impeached." Is this a true quote? What do you make of this?
I mean, obviously not. So, and I think this derives from an underlying thing that I had done actually a lot in front of college council, which was basically go, guys, I'm going to be very open with the powers you have given me, to be very clear with what I am able to do and what I am not able to do. And so that means basically articulating it is technically the case that elections and rules could just disqualify everyone from every election permanently and pick the winners. Is that actually viable? No.
So you raise this question.
Yeah. In the rules, is that technically possible? Yes. Is this actually viable? No. And so I felt that it was very important for them to know the thing that they had constructed, because they had built sort of a weird house of cards, like a house of mirrors, and they needed to know that, and this should have been more alarming for them, right? And it wasn't. They decided not to do anything about it until a random like 7th week in the middle of the spring quarter.
Interesting. And just this week they had another meeting, and it was decided that, I mean, you're running for USG once again, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
my first time. Yeah.
yeah. And it was decided that you could still run, but you couldn't take a position, which basically means why the fuck you're running.
Yeah.
What do you make of that decision? Was that one more based on reality than the impeachment one? How do you make of that?
So I guess the easiest way to deal with it is for my defense, after they had been allowed to sort of say things that weren't true about me over the course of the summer, over the course of the impeachment, after they had said all sorts of things on side chat, they gave me 6 minutes to make my case in front of college counsel, which I think itself sort of speaks to the underlying process. The other thing is that I think in this case, there's a procedural issue which says that they hadn't actually, like, there's a hilarious set of quotes in the Maroon article where they go, the impeachment resolution was supposed to disqualify him from everything, but it doesn't say that. But the sense of everyone in the room was that this is what it did. So firstly, that's not how government works. Secondly, I think that there's a moral question here, which is that the class of 2026 had all of the information in front of them. And they still elected me by a fairly overwhelming margin. So, guys, so there's what we've said is the electorate can pick someone, and if we don't like him, he can't take his seat, which raises creates a terrible precedent by any standard.
One could argue that by them not allowing you to take office in that position, they're being as dictatorial as they claim you to be.
I would say more, because at no point is elections and rules able to just simply say there is one moment where elections and rules will ever say you're disqualified, really.
Which is?
If you fail to turn in if your candidate's petition isn't valid, so basically you don't meet the requirements to hit the ballot, to be on the ballot, so you'll be disqualified from being on the ballot, or if you don't meet the mandatory rules meeting. So this is like some deep elections arcana. But there are only 2 scenarios in which we will disqualify you. The number of times people have tried to get their opponents disqualified for numpty stuff is a lot, but we won't unless really those 2 situations, or at least I have expressly advised elections and rules in the strongest way I possibly can that we don't disqualify people unless those 2 instances. Obviously, we haven't always done that,
and they have.
Yeah.
Interesting. So we're starting to wrap up in a few minutes, and I had a few questions that I wanted to finalize with. It seems to me that the big underlying problem of everything going on was just a terrible lack of transparency.
Yeah.
So, obviously, you mentioned at the beginning, the Maroon article, they didn't ask you to comment on it, even though they claimed to. You were drafting changes to these documents, and people were passing them without fully reading it. You had your impeachment case, which you weren't there. Nobody vouched for you there because they knew you couldn't make it. And after that happened, people in the council admitted that they didn't read the thing at all. Do you think that transparency was the biggest problem? And if so, how do you think they should go about solving that from now on?
I mean, and so yes, that's definitely a major issue. People in undergraduate student government has the worst document management of any place I have ever seen in my entire life. There is no long-term archival system. So we're basically just dependent on people just keeping files. And it's bad because the Maroon just recently emailed me to get old RSO finance documents because current USG has them, says they have them, and either can't find them or can't release them in a timely enough manner.
Interesting.
Right? So transparency is a big problem. When we're talking about these sorts of governance issues, it's less of an issue because it doesn't really matter. No one's going to go back and read college council meeting minutes anyway. The way larger problem is RSOs are systematically unable to determine why their funding was increased or why their funding was cut. And because of that, it is impossible for them to plan on a long-term basis. It is impossible for decent financial management to take place when there is no transparency on these financial documents.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are dooming campus life in this way, and really making RSO leadership a way harder position to do, way less dependable, and way more dependent on the precise connections to student government that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Because depending on the type of RSO you are, or who you know, that matters substantially in how much money you are going to get. Actually, I'll take this moment. I'll look into the camera to say this. The two clubs that I was alleged to either like or dislike were robotics and Model UN. I have no connection to either. Please investigate me. I don't have a connection to either. I like robotics because they offered more services for less money. I'm a big fan of that. More RSO should do that. I have no view on Model UN. I think their budgeting structure is stupid and have told them as much. Doesn't mean I like them or dislike them. Means it makes their budget harder to do.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Finally, not finally, I have two more questions, but do you have any regrets? Is there anything else you would do different if you could go back?
Yeah. So before my last sort of funding cycle started, I sent basically a series of funding principles to College Council because, believe it or not, to spend 7 digits of funding, there is no overarching set of principles for whether we fund Moot Court or the Pizza Club. There's no like
Completely arbitrary.
Yes. Mm. Well, I mean, I wrote new cost guides for some of these committees, so they had some kind of like baseline idea of how much things should cost. But so I guess there are 3 levels of this. The first is how much should things cost? And up until very recently, until I wrote them, we didn't have cost guides over most of the committees, so we didn't know how much things were supposed to cost. Then there's this sort of more meta level of if we don't have enough money to fund both of these things, even though they're all costing the right amount, like this pizza costs the right price and this plane ticket costs the right price, who do we fund? And we still don't have that. And so I sent this document over to College Council as basically a first draft, like, hey, talk about this. And if you look at the minutes, it's just said that the principles are written in a very Nevin way, and they don't talk about it, right? So I really should have pressed them harder on that. They really should, they have to actually make a decision, and getting College Council to make a decision is just about impossible. And then there's the even more meta issue of, the way that RSOs interface with university administration is bad. And it's incumbent on USG to fix that, right? Doc Films has these constant debates with student centers over Max P Cinema. And it's unclear, where do maintenance responsibilities lie? Who really controls it? Because Doc Films has sunk a boatload of money into there. Who actually deals with it? And so I sent an email to the then College Council chair, who's now Executive Vice President, Alex Fuentes, in December of 2024. I then went off to study abroad, and I sort of kept following up about what was happening. To this date, so far as I know, he has reached out to not Doc Films, but to student centers. Mm-hmm. Which means that in the course of nearly a year, what's happened is an email. And so I really should have pressed harder for USG to hey, if you're going to ask me to take these finance responsibilities, that's fine. I can make sure the trains run on time. But you have to actually direct me to do something. As I said in College Council, right, my role as in sort of a bureaucratic perspective is to do what you tell me. Mm-hmm. And in default of that, I will make a policy decision. I should have been more forceful in that you have to tell me what to do so that I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, finally, what's next for you? Well, now you can't be part of, you can't take any more positions yet as of the decision of this week. So what's the plan for now?
I mean, obviously nothing more in student government because that's not an option. I guess the rest of, RSOs keep reaching out, the Maroon keeps reaching out to understand how RSO finances work. And I say this, and it's, I think, unfortunately the case, I'm the only one who knows how RSO finances work. Mm-hmm. That includes, I think, largely university administrators at the Center for Leadership and Involvement. Because their comprehension of how Blueprint works, which is a lot of the underlying mechanics, are not very good, and I had to sort of press them to get information on that. So just sort of helping on that. And then just kind of helping people think about, I am the third in a long line of vice presidents of student organizations who have consistently said that administration should take over the funding of RSOs, should handle it themselves. And university administration has resisted this because they think that they want to use USG as a way to determine how student life on campus should work. Basically, that we should calculate the marginal utilities of spending $1 on Pizza Club and $1 on Model UN and weigh them ourselves. which I think is a good principle. And USG consistently fails at that. They consistently fail at using the resources allocated to them to at all think about the wider student life that we are creating, because we've created a bunch of little ivory towers in campus where they're controlled by these tiny groups. They're very selective. They get large amounts of money, and no one seems to have any desire to make them more open or to reform them in any way, or to actually think about what we're creating when we say we're going to spend $50,000 at mock trial instead of $50,000 for the philosophy and discussions club, right? And so I hope to help people think about that, because if we reallocate money, we are making a decision that way. If we don't, we are also making a decision that way. And I think it's like everyone thinks that USG is this molehill. And to a degree, that's true, right? To a large degree, like, it is irrelevant. But RSOs make up a large amount of what makes the University of Chicago the University of Chicago. And when we don't pay enough attention to the people who are funding that student life, who are funding the vast majority of the student experiences that happen at the University of Chicago, we are implicitly endorsing a student life that is kind of devoid of vitality, that is devoid of an underlying philosophy that we debate and consider and vote on and actually think about as a student body, and we just sort of let it drift.
Perfect. Well, Nevin, thank you for coming. This has been great.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you having me. It's great to finally be able to make it some kind of defense.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Thank you for listening. You have a good day.